Hello, this is Dipesh Mishra. From this session, we're going to discuss about the brief introduction to blockchain and kind of ledger system that we do follow in blockchain system. So let's proceed with the session. The context of this session is all about that what is blockchain, how blockchain works, what is distributed ledger, and how distributed ledger works. So that's what we're going to discuss in this session. So when we talk about blockchain, blockchain is just information that is in a particular block. So to understand the power of blockchain system, there are a lot of things that we can understand, and we can distinguish between basically three things that are commonly muddled up, and like namely the Bitcoin currency, the specific blockchain that underpins it's the idea of blockchain in general. When we talk about blockchain, how can we forget about Satoshi Nakamoto? Because blockchain being developed by the group of researchers in 1991 and that comes into the picture in 2009 by Satoshi Nakamoto. So let's begin with the idea of blockchain, that how blockchain actually works and what is the meaning behind this blockchain concepts. So there are a lot of idea that we can discuss over this blockchain. Basically, when we talk about blockchain information transaction, so how it's happened, let's proceed with it. So basically what's happened in blockchain system, whenever any kind of information has been sent throughout a process, throughout a chain process, that's what we're doing in blockchain. So let's take an example. We are having here a block, we have another block, and we have one another block. When we're going to send the information, this is a chain process that we are following between the different information. So in this, there are information between this chain, and this particular process that we used to say called a distributed ledger. Okay, so when I say distributed ledger, how we can define this distributed ledger? So when I say a distributed ledger, so I will take one example of it. We have this block, and this block is having some data, and this data is being assigned or encrypted by this hash, and to determine this is the hash of previous block. So when we talk about data, data can be anything. So it can be in the form of any kind of a raw image, text, anything else. When we talk about hash, hash is all about a unique ID. So let's say this block having some information of my transaction of money. So this hash will be encrypted by my unique ID. Let's take an example of fingerprint. So fingerprint will be my unique ID, and this particular block is having my data of transaction or the money flow or whatever else. Now this particular block will send to the another block any kind of data after getting permission from my unique ID from my mine access. Okay, so that's how this particular ledger has been assigned, and that is what we used to say called distributed ledger. Yes, so this data can be from which particular person I have taken the money, to whom I am sending the money, and what would be the amount. So this would be the information going to be within my block. You might be aware of Bitcoin. So let's say this is a Bitcoin, one Bitcoin. So this particular Bitcoin will be in the process of in this particular block, and this going to be sent into this process, and this process used to call as blockchain. When the chain or the information will send through one block to the another block within the access of this hash, so then it's being transferred the information from one block to the another block. So now let's talk more over like this blockchain technology basically permits the transaction to be gathered into the blocks and recorded, and then it's allow the resulting ledger to accessed by different server, and accordingly cryptographically chain blocks in a chronological order. Now as I told you, the ledger system, the distributed ledger system, so distributed ledger system are mainly centralized ledger or can be a distributed ledger. Okay, so when we talk about blockchain, so blockchain is a distributed ledger process majorly we followed in a blockchain system. So why does not we follow centralized ledger system, and what is the mean behind the distributed ledger that we are following? As you know, everything, the data right away is centralized. So if you are accessing internet or anything else else. So every single data is centralized over a particular server. So what's the problem having this centralized process, that every single data is in a particular dedicated places? So let's take an example of a bank. So there are multiple ledger system bank holds. Okay, and this multiple ledger of all the client has been recorded to the bank. So bank having access to record all the information of a client A, client B, client C and client D. So if I has to get information, so I need to request to the bank only, and then I'll be able to get any kind of transaction information or anything else, what they are doing with my money and nothing. I did not know anything about it because it is being centralized, and unless I would not get the authority from my bank, I cannot access anything else. So what's happened? That's why different kinds of issue happens with the bank system or our current money process flowing system. So the solution is a distributed ledger system. That's blockchain has given it to us. So in distributed ledger system, all the data, or you can say a ledger or a transaction, are in a distributed format. So let's take an example. There is only one ledger. All nodes have some level of access to the ledger. Like if my money having any of the transaction, so my transaction is in a particular block, so this is being distributed among everyone. Okay, so all have a quite access over the data, and all nodes agree to a protocol that determines the true state of the ledger at any point of time, and this application of this protocol is called sometime achieving consensus. So that's what is all about this distributed ledger system. So as I told you already, what is distributed ledger? So in this distributed ledger, there are different kinds of process happen, like it's a single entity or a multiple entity. So when we talk about a single entity, information flow from a particular node A to node B, then node C, and then node D, and then again to the node E. So it being transferred from one particular block to the another one, to the another one, to the another one, like that. But in the multiple entities, the information are being gathered to everywhere and onto a particular alignment or a network. So when we say about node A, so it is being transferred to node B within a particular entity, and even node E can access the data of everyone, and then node D and node C are the different entity over there. So multiple entity can be accessed in this particular process. So that is the distributed ledger system works. When we talk about how might a distributed ledger works, so as we discussed already, that how we do that, first a user initiates transaction using their digital signatures first of all. Later on, user broadcasts their transaction to the nodes. One or more nodes begin validating each transactions, and again the nodes aggregate and validate the transaction into the blocks, and accordingly nodes broadcast blocks to the each other, and a particular protocol is being used, and later on those blocks reflect the true state in the chain to a prior block, and accordingly things happen. So this is how the distributed ledger works, and that's all about this particular session. So in this one, we have discussed about the initiation and the broadcasting of the transaction, how we do that, validating of transaction and chaining of the blocks within a particular hash function. So that's what we're going to discuss in our further session. So like the power of distributed ledger without a central authority by an individual or entities, no basis to trust to each other. It can be used to create values or issue in assets. It can be used to transfer value or the ownership of assets. It can be used to record those transfer of values and ownership of assets, and further it can be used to allow owners of assets to exercise certain rights associated with the ownership and the record the exercise of those rights. So that's what is the power of this distributed ledger. When we talk about the summary, we discussed over the blockchain and we discussed over the distributed ledger work. So in the upcoming session, we're going to proceed further. Thank you.